Pricing College with your hosts Aidan Campbell
and Joanna Wells.
In today's episode, we want to talk about probably a trend we've seen in recent months and years where larger corporations, multinationals, have a trend or an intention to centralise their pricing function. And we don't mean centralise it in one territory or say in Australia, centralise it in Sydney or Melbourne or whatever else. We're actually talking about centralising across many countries, and we've even seen companies talk about centralising pricing for all of Asia Pacific region, which is, let's be honest, a huge region, and say picking one centre of excellence, maybe Singapore, Hong Kong, wherever it will be, Kuala Lumpur, and centralising it all there. And I suppose we want to talk about, is that a good idea, and what are the potential pros and cons?
Yeah, I think we've seen that trend, as Aidan was saying, with very large companies. I can think of two specifically at the moment that are occurring. Rio Tinto have done it. They've centralised all their pricing, strategy, operations, people within Singapore, and also Dell have spent the last couple of years doing that, gradually migrating people from Australia to Singapore and building that centralised pricing capability there. Other people are following suit, but they're really looking to see if it's working from these bigger companies. Does it work? Is it really more effective? I think partly it's been done through maybe a cost management optimisation perspective. Also, as we all know, centralisation of pricing analytics is good, so you get an overview or dashboards on different activities. It's good for one team to oversee all of that to make decisions quickly. The question is, are those decisions improving as a result, or is it better to have a localized presence with centralisation within local territories? Is that better still for companies? And you know what, I think still companies don't have an answer to that, and they're really just testing and learning, swapping between the two. And there seems to be a correlation between migration to Singapore when the economy dips. So, it really does indicate a cost down initiative more so than, because the answer about whether it's effective or not hasn't really been answered in full. So to draw a conclusion on that, I don't think you can say. I think each have a strengths and weaknesses to it, which we'll continue to discuss.
I think it really depends on the product or service you're selling. If it's a product, let's just take an example and work through it. Let's take an example of, say, like a Rolex watch or any luxury watch or any brand where it's, say, high fashion or haute couture or those sort of things, whereby it's a uniform product. It's not varied in 99.9% of cases by territory. It's very similar. People can check it on the internet. You can buy it overseas and have it posted to you through Amazon, those sort of aspects. In those sort of aspects, to be honest, it does make sense to me to centralise pricing, whether it's Switzerland or Singapore or wherever else. And in those instances, if a company is really building their brand, really working on what the company does, getting the brand messaging out through marketing, those aspects, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense to not allow arbitrage between different countries if the product doesn't, rot away like, food product, and if it can be posted. So you probably would want uniform or reasonably uniform pricing across many territories where you can protect it. And I would say a watch would be a classic example, or a handbag, or even a pair of shoes, etc. Obviously, when you're getting to other things such as services that are consumed in a country that can't be exported, that can't be shipped abroad, those aspects, it becomes very different. It's a whole different ball game. And if you really need market intelligence, market knowledge on the ground, let's give the example of selling bananas. If you're selling bananas, a completely different thing. Where you consume that banana is vitally important. It's like, is it fresh in that territory, in that city, on that day? What is the price level in that country? Are people willing to pay more for the banana? It's very different depending on the product or service.
Yeah, I think in terms of that, I believe, especially in terms of COVID's shown, markets can change very quickly. People's preferences, how they consume, even luxury goods, groceries, is changing. So when you say centralise even Rolex watches to Singapore, does that in some way miss out on the key component of unlocking pricing power and price optimization, which is understanding how people consume. People do consume differently, even if it's a standard product, those products differently in different areas, different regions of the world, different countries. So when you centralise to one area of the world, then you miss out on that. And in a sense, you miss out on those, 20% additional price premiums that you could have got, even for luxury goods. So that really is the secret sauce to pricing, is to understand markets and customer preferences. And sometimes, you're just ripping that away when you move it to another country. So in some way, yes, there's centralisation is good for control and efficiency. You work within your means, or in terms of pricing, within your bandwidths. Everyone sticks to that. The rules are clear. But then when there are white space opportunities or changes in the market, then you miss out on new revenue opportunities. You become less agile as a result. And in that respect also, execution becomes very difficult. It becomes slow and laboured. The communication between teams and regions becomes slow. Everyone just works literally to the same rule book, playbook, and things get lost. And really this is the essence of great pricing. You've got to be agile. You've got to have an expansive viewpoint, an approach to pricing. You've got to be able to test and learn in different segments. And when one country becomes one segment, you miss out on that micro segmentation where you get all of your price premiums.
Yeah, it is. I think even sometimes the most commoditized product, and again with all these things, the answer is it depends. It really depends on so many moving parts. The investment in the value of what you're providing, how you're marketing it, how you're selling it, and all that sort of stuff. I'll even give the example of Macdonald's. They famously were in the Economist magazine. I don't know if it's still at the back, whereby they have the Big Mac index, and it's almost like a uniform product sold across many countries. And they would analyse the price premiums in different areas. But the thing to bear in mind, even about Macdonald's, is maybe the product is the same, but the reason why people buy it in different countries is completely different. In the United States, you have infinite number of competitors in a very similar market, like Denny's and Wendy's and, Burger King. And I'm not trying to make myself look like a fast food fan here. Or you can guess how overweight I am, but it's, that's a very different market, say, than in other countries, where like in India, where it's more of a new entrant and they're having some pricing problems. One of the places I was in previously was in Peru, and in Peru, McDonald's was, to some extent, in some areas it was seen as almost a luxury product, and families would almost save up to go there for the evening. So that aspect, the pricing and how it's done in that country, is very different. I also remember locals were giving a discount if you could present a national card. You were giving a lower price in McDonald's than foreigners or tourists were. So obviously there was localized pricing there as well. So it's I think at the end of the day, you always need local. Big believer in the sales team having the local ability to be flexible, and we've covered this in previous episodes, where you need to be flexible to negotiate, to deal, to offer discounts where required, and to really implement and work with the customers you have. And that can never really be centralised. That human aspect can't really be centralised in an offshore site.
Yeah, McDonald's is like a great example. I mean, they're well known for having very much regional based everything, really, pricing, costs, accountancy, everything's centralised by region. Even their strategy is by region. They found in India, though, they had this Big Mac index, and initially they started applied that thinking in India, and it failed miserably. Having that menu, having that rigid approach in India just failed. It bombed, and for the last 8 to 10 years, they've been really working out, why it failed so much. But principally, it failed because they didn't realise how strong local preferences, customer preferences were. Religion, culture was so significant in India that their McDonald's strategy of the Big Mac leading the way just really didn't work at all. So what they've done, they've become so localized. They literally are really almost offering the same menu as a street vendor, offering street food, because really they found that the street vendor was their main competitor. None of the big, Denny's or any of that, or KFC. It was the street vendor they had to compete against. So they had to radically change their menu, radically change their pricing, as you can imagine. And only now are they seeing results of that. But what has that shown you? They've shown you that, sometimes the regional approach just doesn't work. You have to get local. So I think that's something that pricing functions in multinational organisations can learn from too.
Yeah, I think we've seen, certainly over the last number of years, and certainly this year, we've seen a conglomeration of power. We've seen centralised power of governments taking over to a large extent, corporates getting bigger and bigger, people like Amazon, and there's a one cookie cutter fit thing, and people will take what they're given. But the reality of it is, people are different kilometre to kilometre. People from suburb to suburb are different. The drivers they have, their cultural backgrounds, etc. They want different things. They'll pay money for different things, and their drivers they have people often just don't understand what they are. So, I think it's. You have to look. If you always try to sell the same thing to people across the universe, that will suit the business, but the people probably will not want to buy it. You even look at, I was looking at luxury cars. Apparently, British people buy luxury cars much more than French people do. French people tend to favour small cars, and that's what their cultural norm is, even though the national wealth or the average GDP of those two countries is very similar. So, if you were a car company in Europe centralising pricing for, a luxury car in Britain versus France, the drivers, there's an overlap there, that's not a pun, but what's driving people to purchase that item in different countries can be so different that it almost makes a uniform policy obsolete. That's, I suppose, we've moved away from our original concept a little bit, talked about around the subject, but that's all I think I'll say today.
Yeah, I think overall, when you move to, just to sum up, when you move to that sort of regional, global, centralised pricing capability, it really is more of a finance-led decision, principally from a cost-down perspective, because there's economic pressures. I can get that. But just as when you think this through, the ramifications for pricing is good pricing function, and a centralised capability always looks for new opportunities by micro segment, because that's really where they get the price premium. It's not making huge cost cutting or price increases, it's making small incremental changes, adjustments to pricing according to market changes, according to customer preference changes, according to competitive dynamics. And that really does require more of a localized approach. When you're thinking about optimization and you move things to, a global, regional capability, then you're going to miss out.
Yeah, that's it from me. So have a great day.
Yeah, thanks a lot.